We're gonna finish up our series on Christianese. Please. Okay. So before we get started, I need a couple people to be ready to read these verses.
I'll get that one.
Which one?
That one.
I'll do Romans 12:1.
Genesis 22:5.
Oh yeah. Did you say
I
Genesis?
got Romans 12:1.
Genesis.
I got mine last week.
Okay. Hold up. All right. We're gonna do this one time. Genesis 22:5. Aiden. Okay. John 4:21 through 24. All right. Romans 12:1. Maddie. Genesis 31:13. Holly. Exodus 40:15. Cody. 1 Samuel 10:1. Weston. 1 Samuel 24:10. Hudson. 2 Samuel 1:16. Hayden. 1 Kings 19:15 through 17. You already got it.
Right?
Jaden's got it. All
I
right.
got John.
And John 4:25. You got it? All right.
I got it.
But you got one.
No, but it's fine. I read
There's
a
one
lot
right there.
today.
Genesis.
Okay.
Wait, what do you have?
All right. Everybody good on their verses?
Nope.
Yep.
All right.
No.
What do I have?
Yeah,
John
got it.
4:25.
Yeah, you got John 4:25.
So go with it.
All right.
Ciao.
It's yours.
Ciao.
So quickly. Alrighty. Let's see here. Maddie, you got yours. Holly, you got yours.
Genesis 31:13.
Okay. Hayden, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Jaden, you good?
It's on. I'm good.
Okay. Hudson?
I didn't see it.
Good.
I'm like confused.
Yes.
Yes.
40-15.
All right. I'm gonna say that everybody else is good. We'll move on. So, all right. Worship is our first
Can I
word
write?
tonight. Good. All right. I was smart this time. Oh.
Whoa, that's right.
I got ahead of the game today.
Worship means
All right.
to gather to praise.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Gather together.
Gather. I was about to say that.
Gather together.
What is it?
Fellowship.
Praise
That's
the
a good
Lord.
one.
Gather
Don't
together.
high five you. Yeah.
Capital L.
Uh-huh.
Maddie.
I feel like this is an audible
I said
version of
fellowship.
Simon, you know, trying to remember
Me?
who all said what.
Right?
You guys ever played the Simon game?
Simon said.
The what?
No, it's like a little,
Oh,
it's got like 4 lights and it like does a pattern of lights and you have to like tap the lights in the order that they go.
I didn't know that.
Oh, like
What
Bop
about it? Bop it.
No, well, Bob is basically the same.
What hour? Bop it.
Alright, anything else?
Bop it.
Oh, used to use
Have you
that.
seen my conversation?
Alright. Alright, anything else? Okay, we've got praise the Lord, we've got gather together, we've got fellowship. Anything else?
Ow. Like that's a tactic.
Praise the Lord is kind of is an all around.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Alright. Alright,
Songs of praise.
well, that would go under praise the Lord.
Well,
Thankful, okay, that'll work.
Okay.
Okay, so fellowship, thankfulness.
First, like good things.
Yes, there you go, good thanks. Okay.
Second. For a second, it said Lord in all caps and the Lord. I thought it I glanced at it and I thought it said Lamb and Lord. I was like,
All right. Anything else for fellow or for worship? Any other definitions you guys can think of? Okay.
see.
Well, that was going with praise the Lord, I think, right? Yeah. All right. Good job. Okay. So let's move on to, and those are good definitions, by the way. So I don't want to.
So you know what I really love?
What?
You took the time on writing those.
Thank you.
Now we can read it.
Yeah, because I.
Good job.
You did a good job.
It's almost better than mine.
No. No. It's just legible chicken scratch is what it really is. So.
It looks good.
Okay.
It looks great.
Space, yeah. I had to sit there and go, see. Alright. Alright, so what does it actually mean? It's alright. All right, so what does it actually mean? So the dictionary definition of worship is reverent honor and homage paid to God or a sacred personage or to any object regarded as sacred to attend services of divine worship. Do you guys understand what that's saying?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so that's the dictionary definition of worship. Okay, which is basically just you go to a service, you pray, you sing, you do religious stuff, and you go along. Okay.
You sound like you make it like so just boring.
Well, here, I'm getting to something here though, and that's why I'm kind of just saying it in the way that I am. So when you go to like the way that the Bible comes to the word, like the way that we get the word worship in our Bibles, okay, you get something more like this. It comes from an Old English word, worthsight. I think that's how you say it in Old English, and it means to ascribe worth to something. Okay, so the definition here I think is really good because it specifically says think worship. Okay, it's something worthy to be worshipped. Believing in God, living according to His will, and gathering together around the gospel to encourage one another. So is worship coming on to the building and gathering with believers and singing and praying and everything else?
Well,
Raise your hand for yes. Or, yeah, raise your hand for
in the
yes.
middle. It's like here.
It's here. It's not all the way up.
It can be.
It's not.
Okay.
It also can't be.
What else might it be based on that definition?
Wait.
What else might worship be based on that definition?
Could be like devil worship.
It says that's what you got.
Based on this definition, not devil worship.
I meant the book one.
The dictionary definition.
Yeah.
Well,
No, it's just a big job.
well, it does to a certain extent. Yeah,
Alright.
yeah.
You know, just
Dictionary.
If you-
Okay. Forget this one for the time being. Okay, forget this one for the time being. Based on this one, what else could worship mean?
believing in God.
Believing. Okay. Well, yeah, it's right there. What else? Okay, living according to His will. But what does that mean?
Like to do what He wants.
Okay.
Obey.
Whoop, who said it?
Obey.
There you go. Okay, we could go on and on about what living according to His will means, but essentially that's where it's going to hit on. Real worship.
I'm trying so hard.
I know.
It's okay.
Real worship equals obedience.
Woo.
Okay, and that's the biggest thing to remember, because yes, part of worship does include gathering together. Okay.
Yeah.
Part of worship does include getting together and singing and listening to the word being taught. Okay? That's definitely part of worship. But it's more than that. Worship is living according to His will. It's being obedient. When we gather together like this, that's actually being obedient to what God's will is. Because God wants us to live in community with each other. Okay? So, let's go ahead and read our passages. So who had Genesis 22:5? Was that Aiden? All right, go ahead and read Genesis 22:5.
He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while is that right?"
Yes.
I think that's right.
He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you."
Okay. Where is this in the biblical narrative? Who's talking?
Jesus.
It's Genesis, that's a name.
Paul.
Abraham.
Yeah.
All right. Who's he talking about when he says the boy?
Abraham.
Paul's son.
No,
Not Paul's son, Abraham's son.
Isaac. Yeah.
Which is
All right. So, He's telling his servants, you guys stay here. The boy and I will go up and we will worship. What are they about to do?
This is when God tells them to go sacrifice his son.
Okay? And so this idea of sacrifice is tied to the idea of worship. Okay? John 4:21-24. Who had that one?
Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the spirit and in truth.
Okay. So I think it's safe to say that within that passage, we're probably looking at worship in a couple different contexts. One is worship like what we think of, singing and everything else. But it's also talking about obedience. Okay? Romans 12:1. Maddie?
Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship.
Okay. So what's your true and proper worship?
Pleasing God.
Pleasing God by being a
Obedient son, a child.
living sacrifice. It does tie in, Cody. I was just looking for that specific phrase.
That's how you define obedience.
You say living or lays?
Come on, it's not that bad.
I'm sorry.
All right. So, we're supposed to be a living sacrifice. By being a living sacrifice, we are worshiping God. By being obedient, by following his will, by continuing to seek out that which is in us that does not belong with God, and allowing God's Spirit to transform us to be more like him. That's our living sacrifice. Okay? So, we talk about this all the time, but just, once again, a reminder, when you go home tonight, whenever you pray, whenever you do your prayers, whether it's at night, in the morning, while you're driving to school or whatever, be thinking about what is in you that doesn't match up with God. Because the more that you do that, the more that you focus on that and what it is that needs to change in your life, the more you're going to become a living sacrifice for God. All right? So, how would you describe worship to somebody else?
Being with other people and praising God.
Okay. What else?
All of those who believe in will.
Obey.
Yeah, obey. Follow his will. Okay? And so the definitions are pretty simple, but what I want you guys to take away from this as far as how do you describe worship to others is that I want you to understand the idea that it's more than just singing. It's more than just going to a building and gathering together for an hour or two. But there's more involved in it than that. Okay? And if you guys can share that with other people, you'll help them to understand that concept too, because this is the most important part of worship that you can really get across to anybody else, is the idea of obedience. Because you can go to church without being obedient. You can show up. You can be baptized and not be obedient. And so this idea of obedience is what I want you guys to be able to focus on when you're sharing that with others. All right. Next word.
Lord.
Lord. Or Lord. All right.
Can I do it again or just somebody else?
We can just let somebody else do it. That's what you got?
Okay.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
Sorry.
All right. So,
Peanut butter.
what do you guys think when you see those two lords?
One's capitalized, one's not.
Okay. Go ahead and write it down. One's capital, one's not.
Or like one's
One
A
means something and one means the other. one is commanding, one is not asking.
Okay.
Because that's all in caps, so it's like
Does
more.
it caps normally mean like yellow?
One is wrong and one is right. That's where I was getting that. Thank you.
I don't know. Lord.
All right.
Well,
Always right.
Well,
yeah,
one is
that's-
God.
One is right.
The all-capital one. And one is like
Mostly
the Lord of the castle.
Exactly. One is wrong. One
Alright.
is right and one is wrong. That's what I was trying to get. I was
And one is
Oh.
commanding. You didn't write that.
I
Demanding.
said commanding.
Commanding.
One is not dust.
Oh, commanding.
One is there was dust on it's part of the board.
Okay.
That's like one
Hey.
is right.
All right. All right. Any other definitions that you guys can think of? Anything else that comes to mind when you see those words? Good.
Maybe like one is talking to him and one is like just addressing
Okay.
who it is. I could be wrong though.
Yeah.
Remember, this part of the definition is just what you think it is. Okay.
No, I'm wrong. When I look at all caps, I'm like, okay. Like it's,
That's
like
God.
spit it out. Yeah, like spit it out. I don't appreciate you picking me.
All right.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know. It's just.
We'll go ahead and call it good there and move on. Thank you. That's it.
Probably good.
You done good, bud.
All right. So here's what it actually means. Okay. Both of these words have two separate meanings. Okay. So when you look at Lord, this first comes about, at least for the Hebrews, it first comes about in Exodus chapter 3, verses 14 through 15. It's when Moses encounters God in the burning bush. And it says in your text, when Moses is asking, who shall I say has sent me? God replies with, I am who I am. Yeah, and that is actually down below in your footnotes, okay? Now, you guys ready for a Bible project video? Because this is a really good explanation of the word Lord. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
What's this? Give me a blue card.
No, just kidding. You're starting. I can't. What did you say?
Okay, let's go.
I threw my cup away.
That's the goons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, I'm good now.
All right.
After you, son.
All right. Here we go.
It's okay, Ted. That's what
I was so excited.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words as a way of expressing their devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. We're going to look at the second key word here. Lord, written in all capital letters. This is the personal name of Israel's God. We first learn the meaning of this name in the story of Moses and the burning bush in the book of Exodus chapter 3. God appears to Moses and he commissions him to liberate the Israelites from slavery. And so Moses wonders, what if people ask the name of the God who has sent me? And so God responds, tell them, Ehyeh has sent me to you. Now, that Hebrew word Ehyeh means I will be. In other words, God's name means that he is the one who is and who will be. God's existence doesn't depend on anyone or anything else. This God simply is. But it will sound kind of strange for Moses to go say to the Israelites, I will be has sent me to you. Only God can say, I will be. So in the next sentence, God tells Moses the version he should say aloud, Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, he has sent me to you. Now, that word Yahweh is the ancient Hebrew form of the verb he will be. And this is the personal name of the God of Israel. It appears over 6,500 times in the Old Testament. Now, here's what's interesting. Over the centuries, Israelites wanted to honor the sacred nature of this divine name. So, as they read the Hebrew Bible aloud and they came to this name, they stopped saying Yahweh and instead started saying the Hebrew word for Lord, which is Adonai. Now, this practice has been continued throughout the centuries, and so later, when people started translating the Bible into English, they adopted the same practice. Instead of spelling out the divine name, they translated it as Lord, spelled in all capital letters. Okay, you got that? Good, because there's more. Ancient Jewish scribes wanted to prevent anyone from even accidentally saying this name aloud when you read the Hebrew Bible. And so they came up with a visual device to remind you to make sure you say Adonai. They took the 4 consonant letters of the divine name. These letters correspond to our English letters YHWH. Then they inserted the 3 vowels from the word Adonai and combined these together to create an artificial hybrid word, which if you pronounced it, it would say Yahuwah, but no Israelite ever said Yahuwah. It's simply a visual reminder to say the word Adonai. Now, it gets more interesting. Much later, Christian scribes came along who didn't know that Yahuwah was an artificial word, and so they began to say it aloud and spell it in their writings. This is the word that eventually entered into English as Jehovah. It's a word many people still use today. But the main thing is, the word Lord in all capital letters is an indication of the divine name. Don't confuse it with the word Lord in your English translations that's not in all capital letters. That is the actual Hebrew word Adon, which just means Lord or master. This word can refer to people like kings, or the master of a servant, even a shepherd over his sheep. And sometimes biblical authors will use this word to refer to God, like in the phrases, the Lord of all the earth, or the Lord of lords. But behind all of these words, Jehovah, Lord, Adonai, stands the original divine name of the God of Israel. It refers to the one who was, who is, and who forever will be.
These guys have a video on everything.
Almost. They keep on adding to the collection. Can somebody turn the light on real quick?
Oh, you bet.
Like, okay. Okay. So, do you guys have any questions about that? Was that clear?
We're having in today's, they don't. Some of the Jewish sects don't call him Adonai. They actually say the name. And for some reason, I think it's only the more traditional ones, the Orthodox Jews. They say just the name. I don't remember the Hebrew word, but it's just the name.
Oh, okay.
Because they're overemphasizing the. You should not take the name of the Lord your God in vain.
Yeah.
So they just say the name in their prayers.
Yeah, and a lot of that just kind of gets down to the concept of this consistent, like, interpretation of the law where they just continue to kind of drag things out more and more. If you look in the text, you'll actually notice that there's a lot of different names for God. Okay? And one way that the people that go through and look at the text in its original languages will determine different authors of different sections is the name of God used. So in some ways, there's some places there's El Elyon, there's El Shaddai, there's Elohim, and like they point out here, there's Adonai and Yahweh and all this other different stuff. Okay. Why? Well, they all mean different things. How many of you guys know what your name actually means?
Mine means noble.
Okay.
If Aiden knows, he knows mine.
I think. I googled it.
Aiden? What's your name mean?
Fire.
Fire. Okay. So probably
Straight up fire.
the same thing.
Son, I'm
Divine,
son.
like, well,
Fire.
there's 3 there when you look it up, but it's divine peace. Like the one that
Okay.
it has to do with peace. That's about
So
it.
we're dead.
What?
What? Not technically.
I think
I
mine's
don't think
Irish.
that's right.
In a way.
Okay. All right. So, what you have to remember is that names, guys. All right. What you guys have to remember is that names mean something. Okay. And so during the summer, I'm gonna actually try and have a series so that we can actually look at the different names of God, what their purpose was, and so forth, and kind of go from there. So, Lord is God's with the when you see it in the text like that, that's when the author was actually using God's own name. Okay? So when you see it like this, like they said in the video, the basic definition for that is a person who has authority, control, or power over others, a master, chief, or ruler. How many of you guys have studied medieval history?
I am right now.
Sounds pretty cool.
Right now? Okay. So in medieval times, as people were, as cities and such were growing in the European area, what would happen is you'd have these lords who ruled over a region of land. And their role was to protect the people under their care. So if you had a whole bunch of these different farmers out there taking care of stuff, your role was to protect them should somebody try and attack your kingdom. Okay? And you served the Lord. Yeah. It's a medieval history. Moving on. Yeah.
And also, those farmers, if like someone would attack, the knights would round them up and they'd be warriors.
Yeah.
How do you know
Moving on. Moving on. All right. So now, what I want to emphasize here is that Lord, like this, is still an English word. Okay? So when you go into the actual text and you look at what they're using when this word comes up in our text, what they're really saying is something along the lines of Father or mighty Father. Well, if a father is supposed to be if a father is doing what they're supposed to be doing, they should be taking care of you, right? If a father is doing what they're supposed to be doing, then if somebody comes and hurts you, what are they supposed to do?
Protect you.
Protect you. All right? Well, God is a mighty Father. All right? And so that's why every once in a while you see this. It's not the same as this, but it is used, like they talked about in the video, to refer to God in some settings. Okay? So, how do we describe that to others?
Huh.
You just do.
You say the one that is
Show 'em the video.
lowercase.
You can really show them the video. That would be one of the easiest ways to do it. If you guys actually look in the front of most of your Bibles, there should be an explanation as to the translation for the Yahweh and the capitalized Lord. Okay, if you
in my phone, and it's not in
babe.
your
All right,
Okay.
when you see this, okay, when you see this, every once in a while you'll see it called the Tetragrammaton.
That's a good word.
Yes.
Okay, remember. Remember when you saw in the video how they wanted to preserve the sacred nature of the name of God? So they would put it like this. Alright? Tetragrammaton. If you see God's name in 4 letters, it's the Tetragrammaton.
Can I get the definition?
Tetra. Alright.
Tetra.
Alright. So that is Lord. Alright?
I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did. Way to go. Alright. Last one for the night. Christ, Messiah, anointed.
do it.
Alright.
Oh.
So what do you guys think it means?
Christ as in like Jesus,
Okay, Jesus,
Messiah.
Savior. Okay.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Thanks.
What else?
Was mine just bad? Yeah.
Yours was amazing.
Oh, I must have not heard it.
What?
What did you say?
Jesus.
Oh, I heard
Yeah, I
Jesus
know.
and I
I
heard
heard that
Savior.
one in
What
the
did you
third
say?
grade.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay.
He's the one that said that.
Oh,
Lizards. I know.
yeah, we got Jesus up there. And Master, what else?
Like names or
Just whatever comes to mind when you hear the words Christ, Messiah, or anointed.
When I hear anointed, I think of the cup that overflows.
Okay.
the verse.
Yeah.
The cup that overflows.
My shepherd.
Oh, like,
Okay.
say the whole thing
Or
first.
Psalms, but we just
Done.
All right. Shh. What else? What else comes to mind when you see those words?
I was thinking Messiah.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Jeff. You can sit down.
Ultimate healer, I don't know. That's which one to put. Ultimate healer.
Okay.
Ultimate healer, I don't know.
So,
Ultimate healer of man made perfect. Well, I don't
all right.
know.
Shh. All right, you can go ahead and sit down.
Ultimate, I don't know.
Okay. So, guys.
Hi. Good.
Okay. All right. It does not. Christ is not the last name of Jesus. I want to emphasize that, just to make sure that we say that loud and clear. It's not like it's Jesus Christ and like, he got that name from Joseph or anybody else. Okay. Christ is a term. Okay. So, Christ is Greek for anointed one. Messiah is Hebrew for anointed one.
So wait.
Yes, exactly. They are all connected.
Was I wrong?
Okay. All right. So anointed means to be set apart for God's purpose. And it can be people or things that can be anointed. Okay? So let's go ahead and look at some of these passages. We've got Genesis 31:13. Who had that?
Oh, me.
My lady.
All right, Holly, go ahead and read Genesis 31:13.
I am the God of Bethel, who you anointed a pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now leave the side that wants to go back to me.
Sorry, I missed something. Go ahead and say it again.
I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar.
Okay. So he anointed a what?
A pillar.
A pillar. Why?
Because they made a vow.
Yes.
Okay. He made a vow to God. Okay. So he's setting it apart for a purpose, for God's purpose. All right. You see people do things like this a little bit more. In Exodus, you'll see the word anointed come up a lot because as God is telling Moses, this is what you're going to do. You guys okay? All right. As God is trying to tell Moses how to go about setting up the tabernacle, he is telling him, you need to anoint these things. You'll need to anoint different people. Okay? Go ahead and read Exodus 40:15. Who had that one?
I did.
All right.
Good. Anoint them just as you anointed their fathers, so they may serve me as priests. Their anointing will be to a priesthood that will continue throughout their generations.
Okay. So it said anoint them so that they
Will anoint their father. No, just as you anointed their father.
All right. So continue from the part so that
they may serve as priests.
yes, so that they may serve as my priests. Okay. In the Old Testament, who could approach God?
Priests.
Priests. Why? Because they were anointed. Because God specifically said, Levi's family is going to be the one to serve before me. Okay? And so God's specifically saying, so that they can come before me, anoint them so that they are set apart for this purpose to serve me. Okay? Who's got 1 Samuel 10:1? All right.
Then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, has not the Lord anointed you the ruler over his inheritance?
All right. So he anointed Saul. Why? What did it signify?
Wasn't he killing a bunch of Christians? So he needed to be.
You're thinking of Saul in the New Testament. Saul in the Old Testament.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure about history.
Okay. Why did Samuel anoint Saul? What did that serve? What purpose did
God
it?
chose him.
God chose him for what?
He was the king.
To be the king.
His inheritance.
To be the king. All right. So the people have been saying, we want a king, we want a king. And so God is saying, okay, you want a king? This is your king. I have chosen him for this purpose to be your king. And so he's anointed. Go to 1 Samuel 24:10.
This day you have seen your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against the master because he is the Lord's anointed.
Okay. Who's talking? Who's talking? Do you guys recognize this scene in the Bible? Huh? All right.
This day you have seen your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against you, master, because he is the Lord's anointed.
Oh, it's whenever Saul was like in the cave and cut off his robe.
Yep. Exactly. Was David anointed at this point?
No.
Yeah, he was.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
So God has said Saul is the king, but God decides, okay, Saul is not going to continue as king. He's not going to be my guy anymore. I'm not going to follow. I'm not going to help him out. He's on his own because he doesn't want to listen to me. Saul doesn't pay attention to God. He does what he wants. And so God says, I'm going to choose David as my anointed. He's going to serve my purpose. And David has a chance to kill him, but he doesn't. Why? Because he's the Lord's anointed. Servant's a good way to look at it, though. I mean, it is. Because you are serving God because you have a purpose. Okay? And so David is specifically saying, because even though I am anointed, I have been selected for this role, he still is anointed as well. And so I am not going to do anything to contradict that. I'm not going to strike him down. That's not my job. That's God's job. If anybody's going to take him out, it's going to be God. Go to 2 Samuel 1:16.
For David had said to him, Your blood be on your own head, your own mouth testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed.
Okay. So, do you guys remember who David is talking to? It's either, I think it's an Amalekite that shows up in David's camp, and he's saying, hey, I got good news. Saul and his son are dead. And, yeah, and David, of course, is not happy about this news. He's really distraught. He says, how do you know this? And the guy's like, oh, man, I walked up to him, and the Amalekite knows the history between Saul and David. And he says, man, I got up to Saul, and I was walking through the camp, which basically means he was going through scavenging for whatever he could find that he could sell. He was going through dead bodies to find material that he could sell afterwards. And he says, I was going through the camp, and I just kind of found Saul. What do you know? And he was still alive. And he asked me to kill him. So I did. So, congratulations, your enemy's dead. And David's like, that's not congratulations. Yeah, you're dead. Because that was God's chosen servant, and you killed him. And so there's this special role assigned to the idea of an anointed one. Go to 1 Kings 19:15 through 17.
The Lord said to him, Go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aaron. Also anoint Jehu son of Nimshi king of Israel, and anoint Elisha son of Shaphat from Abel Meholah to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escaped the sword of Hazel, and Elisha will put to death, and you escaped the sword of Jehu.
Okay. So, God is speaking to Elisha, and he's telling him to anoint 3 separate people. The first one is Hazael.
Yeah,
Hazael. Okay. To be king over what?
Aram.
Aram. Aram is not Israel. God is specifically telling Elijah to anoint the king of another country. And so God is saying, I have a special purpose for Hazael. And he just said it right there, that Hazael is going to strike down people in Israel. And then he tells him to go and anoint Jehu as the next king of Israel. And Israel, or Jehu, is going to get anybody that doesn't get killed by Hazael. And then he has him anoint Elisha. Foreign king, Israelite king, prophet. They all have specific roles, chosen roles by God. Last one, John 4:25.
The woman said, I know that Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us.
Okay. Is that NIV? I thought there was something about it. Well, yeah. So, Messiah, anointed one, is going to be the one that's going to rescue Israel. Okay? And so Jesus has a specific role. He has a purpose by God, and that's to save us, to rescue us from our sins. All right. Any particular ways you guys want to talk about how you would describe that to others?
Christ is Greek for anointed one.
Okay.
Messiah is Hebrew for anointed one. Anointed in English for anointed one.
And there's a lot of different ways to say the Lord in the
Okay.
Bible. That Christ is the last name of Jesus.
All right. The Christ is what?
Not the last name of Jesus.
The last king of the Jews. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I
What?
said the last name of Jesus.
No, that's not the last name of Jesus. Oh, okay. Sorry. All right. Anything else?
Well, she wrote.
Right. The biggest part is to remember is this: is set apart for God's purpose. All right. So next week we will start our last series for the year of 2017 for Wednesday nights.
Yay!
Shabba.
What was Jesus text? Finally getting to this one.
What is
Like
this?
my teacher, she's like, she said she was gonna gather some of the last set of programs we're gonna do this year,
Yeah.
until January. It's
Yeah.
like, no.
We have a lot of down.
That's ours. All right. So close, almost. All right. So that's next week. All right. All right. So Sunday, we need to go to the Wallmans and we need to clear up some leaves for them. Okay. Huh? Seeing as we're gonna need to bag them and get them out of their yard,
No.
if you want to take them home and
We'll
jump
burn
in them.
No, I'm
down.
taking them home.
But aside from that, we need to meet here at 2:00 so we can clear the leaves out of the Wallman's yard. Okay. After that, we're having the church Christmas party, so there's no designated youth event. I'm gonna try and get some stuff together for Know Your Neighbor with the whole church. Is there any other games that you guys would want to teach the church how to play?
Fiddle-dee and fiddle-dum.
Don't know that one. We're gonna move on. Okay.
Oh,
Youth Christmas party. Don't forget gift exchange. $1 limit. Become creative. Invite your friends. Okay. Food. Abby and I were talking. We were thinking about just picking up a bunch of bags of the chicken wings or boneless chicken wings over at Walmart.
You guys need to bring sides, okay?
Yes. Hey.
I want you guys to repeat back what I said.
Bring sides.
Okay.
Don't bring
Go with
Hey, bring sides and drinks.
Then you
Sides
can
and drinks.
Hannah.
Hannah.
That's a little
Hannah.
Yes.
I'm probably gonna leave around 4:30.
That's fine.
I'll call Hannah.
That's fine.
I can stay the whole time.
Alright, hey, there's a note on the lock-in. Yo!
Everyone circle back.
Why was